Part 1. Make no mistake. This book series is not written for the common neurotypical earthling. It is written expressly for intergalactic travellers, and in particular for earthbound intergalactic travellers called Guardians, who need some help acclimating themselves to this most unusual planet. In recent decades, there has been an unprecedented increase in the number of intergalactic travellers arriving on planet Earth, on the order of 10,000 per day. This trend is expected to continue. An unforeseen complexity of this migratory phenomenon has been millions upon millions of distress calls being sent out daily from all these earthbound intergalactic travellers who have found themselves in some sort of jam. These types of distress calls are normally handled by the help desk of the GOD, the Galactic Optimization Department. However, the sheer number of these distress calls has overloaded the circuit boards of the GOD, leaving many travellers in a doozy, stranded and unable to free themselves from all manner of questionable or embarrassing predicaments. As a quick and effective fix, the GOOD, Galactic Union Department, arranged for a nifty travel guide to be compiled and written by one of heaven's highest archangels. Me. Part 2. "Calm down," said the woman with a twinge of empathy. "I can see now that you really don't know who I am, do you?" Her wings folded back down and were then hidden behind her once more. "Let me see if I can fix that." The winged lady looked down into a gleaming, diamond-studded shoulder bag and removed various glowing, tool-like objects. She stepped forward holding what appeared to be a pair of flickering electronic tweezers connected to a very large hypodermic needle. "Here, Annie, let me just reroute your brain's limbic sector ZZ alpha pathway from amygdala sector CD beta to hypothalamus sector AB gamma." Annie jumped out of bed to her feet. "No!" She backed up against the wall. "Don't you touch me with that evil weapon!" Annie slid along the wall towards the window. Little did she know it was open when she lost her footing. She felt herself begin falling backwards out the open window, towards the bushes below, but strangely, it was in slow motion. During the fall, she realized this was still probably, hopefully, a dream, because she never seemed to land. Still, she did wonder if the bushes would eventually help soften the impact, and if that wasn't strange enough, there was the sound of a train vibrating through her entire body. Soon she got used to the slow falling sensation and the loud roar, and began to notice her mind was feeling extraordinarily clear and smart. She quickly and easily worked out one of her physics special relativity homework problems, just like that, which until now had been torturing her for days on end. Next, she solved a few calculus homework problems that had been bugging the daylights out of her, also at breakneck speed. Finally she landed, but not in the bushes. It felt as if she was bouncing very gently on her own bed. In fact, she was. So she logically assumed the dream was now over. She sat upright and looked at her alarm. It was bedtime. "Phew," she thought. "Just a dream." Laying back onto her pillow, she spread her arms wide. Then she noticed the tall, blonde woman was still at the foot of the bed. "What? You again?" yelled Annie. "You can't be here. I'm awake now." "Okay, so you don't remember me. But you do remember who you are, don't you?" "Well, not really, no." So who am I?" "Who are you?" the woman asked, pacing Annie's floor. "Who are you? Well, let me ask you this. Are you an earthling neurotypical?" "Well, I'm going to guess no on that one." "Mom!" "Guess? Why do you have to guess?" the lady asked incredulously. "Because that's a new word to me. Neurotypical. I'm guessing I'm not neurotypical because I'm strange, different, odd and weird, and so not very typical." that would leave me to guess I'm not neurotypical either. I'm not typical in any way, shape or form. The lady sighed and crossed her arms. Annie, are you, or are you not, a guardian? Part 3. Thanks, said Annie. Hey, are you dreaming too? Not really, no, said the winged boy as he walked behind her down the stairs. I'm just auditing the class. Oh, so can you fly with those? Asked Annie. Sure, look at this. The boy spread his wings, floated upwards and jumped over Annie as if playing leapfrog. He then landed, light as a feather, right in front of her, smiling proudly, his eyes twinkling. Whoa! Annie's eyes widened. She couldn't stop staring at his wings, which were enormous and very transparent looking. It seemed like they were alive, swirling like the surface of a rainbow river. Halfway down the stairwell, the winged boy stopped, turned to the right, and curiously held his hands over the wall. Suddenly a door appeared, and the boy opened it. He looked at Annie. I'll only be a second, he whispered. So wait for me, will you? It seemed as if he was doing something secret. He entered, and then closed the door behind him. Still in the stairwell, Annie slowly opened the door and peeked inside. She saw a large room filled with shelves. On the shelves were thousands of large glass jars, each filled with a different coloured liquid. At first it seemed quite lovely, until she noticed what was in the jars. Each appeared to contain a very large brain. A very large human brain. Annie suddenly felt a revolting feeling in her stomach and completely lost her appetite. She quickly returned to the stairwell, slamming the door. The boy immediately came back out, held his hands over the door as before, this time making it vanish, and then turned to Annie. Hey, what is it? I take it you saw the brains then? Annie nodded, continuing to hold her hand over her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. Hey, look, Annie, no one got hurt if that's what you're wondering. Those are just models of brains. Nobody actually had one of those in their heads or anything. Well, they're in liquid, so they have to be real, don't they? Said Annie, defying the winged boy. Plastic models don't need to be in liquid. Yes. Well, no. I mean, I understand your concern, since on Earth, where you live, they make the models of body parts out of coloured plastic. They taught us that in those pre-purgatory classes we all took at the Library of Light. But in this old purgatory laboratory, the boy pointed to the blank wall where the door had been, those old brain models are actually made of living cells. But it doesn't mean they were in anyone's head. No, they're still just working models, and they're only in saline mineral solution to make them float properly. Annie relaxed, but only a bit. Those jars, continued the boy, contain all the early prototypes developed from the Guardian brain design. They were preserved for beings like me who are interested in following the original research and development progress. Well, then how were they made? Annie couldn't help imagining large graveyards filled with brainless corpses. Oh, well, get this. Each and every brain was made using heavenly blueprints. Those are like blueprints on Earth, but have a few extra dimensions. You know, left and right, up and down, back and forth, plus time, future and past, plus inwardly curling clockwise and counterclockwise, and then add curls to the curls. Whatever. Too much information. I can see I've lost you. And then those multidimensional blueprints were used to create a 1-hour thinking brain prototype by using another heavenly technology called etheric transmogrification, or something like that. Oh, said Annie, amazed. What do you mean, a 1-hour prototype? Well, each brain prototype was temporarily inhabited by a heavenly volunteer for about an hour, who then offered feedback on it. They did it between their lives, you know, to get a few extra karma points. I did it once myself. You did? Annie was incredulous. Why would you do such a thing? Well, I did it for the points. He laughed, and then suddenly looked somewhat serious and let out a small cough. And for research too, of course. I had to tell the researchers my impressions of the brain. It was too strange for me, though. I had to quit when my hour was up. One brain was enough. I bet it was strange. Annie shuddered at the thought of being inside a bodiless brain for an hour. But did you help them improve it? Well, sure. My contribution to the project was realising that the brain I was inhabiting wasn't properly connecting the tasting and smelling senses with the heart brain. So the researchers fixed the problem, and in doing so they improved the culinary senses of the Guardian. And all because of my contribution. Cool, isn't it? Annie nodded. That's how they kept improving the brain. They would test out each new prototype on various volunteers like me, see? And then go back to the drawing board over and over until they got it right. They were mainly interested in whether it could solve problems well enough, that sort of thing. You know, to help Earth. I've been cataloguing the entire process of Guardian brain development for my own curiosity. Annie's stomach rumbled loudly. Shall we have some lunch? The boy descended a few steps, and then opened the door to the break room for Annie. This time, just for her. And bowed. I'm Charlie, and now I have to go serve pizza. He promptly flew off. Annie, still shaken by the brains, was suddenly faced with the prospect of manoeuvring through a tightly packed crowd of famished students, virtually all of them possessing large and cumbersome wings. She somehow managed to reach a long white table the length of an infinite line, laden with the most delicious-smelling but strange-looking pizza imaginable, in many colours and flavours. She took a slice that had familiar vegetarian items sprinkled on its still bubbling cheese, and noticed it was translucent, much like Charlie's wings. Only the colours on the pizza didn't crawl like snakes, which put Annie at ease somewhat. The experience of putting the translucent slice into her mouth was a bit otherworldly, but it turned out to be the most delicious pizza she had ever tasted in her 16 years of life. She proceeded to devour the entire slice in less than a minute, and fervently hoped no one would notice her poor manners. As she gulped down the last delectable morsel, alas, her eye caught Charlie's about 50 feet away. He had seen. He was, coincidentally, also chugging his last piece of crust. Holding his hand over his mouth and shaking with mirth, he winked at her. Annie swallowed and felt her cheeks become hot, even though there was no spice on the pizza.